She was supposed to be a joke. Two poor twin girls pushed onto a school stage just to be laughed at. But when they opened their mouths, silence fell, and a single dad's quiet life was never the same again. Before we begin this unforgettable journey of music, healing, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this are rare, and sometimes just one voice can change everything. Now let me tell you what really happened. The snow had arrived early in the Nebraska plains that year. By mid-November, the wind had already swept white over the cracked roads, and the trees stood bare, like skeletons aching for spring. Sawyer Whitlock tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup, the windshield wipers swiping against flurries of sleet. The heater sputtered warm air inconsistently, just like everything else in his life lately. He had made this drive 1,000 times from the lumberyard back to his weathered cabin, nestled at the edge of Pine Hollow. But something felt different that day, a stillness so profound it made the road feel like it was holding its breath. It was then that he saw it. Just past the bend near the abandoned rail yard, a rusted shipping container stood with its doors half ajar, slightly swaying in the wind. At first he might have passed it like usual, but a flicker of movement, a small, frantic hand slapping the metal seized him. Sawyer slammed the brakes. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as the truck skidded slightly before stopping. Without thinking, he flung open the door and bolted through the snow. Each gust of wind sliced through his coat, but he barely noticed. As he reached the container, he heard it tiny whimpers. No singing. Faint, cracked humming like a lullaby remembered in fear. He yanked the door open fully, and his breath caught in his throat. Inside, curled against a moldy blanket, were two girls, twins no older than 10. Their cheeks were flushed raw from the cold lips trembling. One of them looked up, eyes wide but unafraid. The other held a small paper snowflake in her hand, now damp and torn. "Please," the first one whispered. "Don't tell them we hid here." Sawyer didn't ask questions. He just shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around both of them. "We need to get you warm." "Come on." The girls hesitated. "Are you going to call someone?" one asked. "I might," he said, honestly lifting the lighter of the two into his arms. "But right now, I'm going to save your lives." Back at his cabin, the wood stove roared as heat began to thaw the air. Sawyer set down mugs of warm cocoa on the table, while the girls, now in dry clothes, sat close together under a quilt. "What are your names?" he asked gently. Junie said, the bolder one. "She's Lyra. We're twins. 9 3/4. He smiled faintly. "That's pretty exact." Junie nodded. "Our mom always said numbers matter." "Where is she now?" Junie looked down. "She left. Aunt Carla's supposed to take care of us, but she said if we cried one more time, she'd leave us in the woods." Sawyer swallowed hard. The past always had a cruel way of circling back. He'd heard too many stories like this. Some ended with hope, most with headlines. He stood and walked into the hallway, knocking gently on a door. "Maisie," he called. "You okay in there?" There was no response. There rarely was. Maisie hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years, not since the day she was carried out of her middle school auditorium after fainting on stage. The teasing, the whispers, the spotlight, it had broken something in her. Diagnosed with selective mutism, she had become a ghost in her own home, speaking only in glances and gestures. Sawyer thought maybe naively that bringing these girls into the house, even for just a night, might stir something in her. He didn't expect miracles, but a moment of connection, a sign of light. Back in the living room, Lyra hummed softly as she sipped her cocoa. The melody was almost aimless, yet strangely comforting. Junie closed her eyes, then joined in 2 soft, imperfect voices, intertwining like old harmony lines meeting again after years apart. From down the hallway, the door creaked open. Maisie appeared barefoot in her oversized flannel shirt, Her eyes locked on the twins. She didn't speak, but she stood there and listened. Sawyer froze, watching his daughter with a quiet awe. She hadn't even looked at a stranger in months. Now she stood still, her eyes damp with something that looked like memory, or maybe longing. Junie smiled at her. "Hi, you can sit with us if you want." Maisie didn't move, but she didn't leave either. She leaned against the doorframe and tilted her head like she was remembering a song she hadn't dared sing. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep on the pull-out couch, Sawyer sat alone in the kitchen with an untouched cup of coffee. The air smelled like old pine wood and cinnamon toast. He stared at the wooden box on the shelf across from him, a small recording box with a built-in mic, the kind used by songwriters in the old days. Inside were the last recordings his wife had made with Maisie before she passed, lullabies, giggles, whispered harmonies. They hadn't been played in 2 years, just like the piano in the corner, just like the man who used to believe music could save people. But something about Junie and Lyra, it reminded him of the old days, the simplicity of melody, the strength in bare, unpolished voices. Sawyer reached for the box, and for the first time in years, he opened it. The next morning came quietly without fanfare, just a pale gray light spilling through the frost-laced windows and the creak of wood settling in the cold. Sawyer stirred first, automatically reaching for the coffee pot, as if muscle memory were stronger than sleep. He didn't say much, not even to himself. He never had to. The quiet had long since become part of the walls. But today, there were 3 extra breaths in that silence. The twins were still asleep on the fold-out couch, their arms tangled like the vines of a single root. Sawyer watched them for a long moment before lighting the stove. The flames crackled, the air warmed. Something shifted inside him, soft and unfamiliar, like a note played on a guitar that hadn't been tuned in years, but still sang true. He didn't want to name it. He just let it be. Maisie was already sitting at the kitchen table when he returned with 2 chipped mugs of cocoa. She hadn't made a sound coming in. She never did. She sat with her back straight, hands folded, eyes on the steam curling up from her own cup. She didn't touch it. Her long dark hair hung loosely around her face, curtaining her expression the way words no longer could. Sawyer sat across from her and waited. That was their dance, a stillness in which he offered presence, and she, on the rare occasion, offered the same. "You okay with them staying a bit?" he asked quietly. Maisie didn't respond, but her fingers curled slightly around the cup. That was a yes. He nodded. "Good. I think they need it. And maybe we do, too." She looked up at that, just for a second, enough for him to see her eyes, those same eyes that used to sparkle when her mother sang to her on the back porch, long before the silence moved in. Later that morning, Junie and Lyra stirred awake, groggy but smiling. They helped set the table unasked, clinking spoons and giggling at the worn-down toaster that liked to burn only one side of the bread. Maisie watched from the hallway, half shielded by the frame. She was still a shadow in her own home. Lyra spotted her and waved. "We saved you the red plate." "It's the only one with no chips," Maisie hesitated, then stepped forward. Slowly, she took the plate in both hands and sat at the table. Sawyer held his breath. 3 girls. 1 table. No words spoken, but something far better. Laughter, breath, belonging. The snow outside kept falling. School was canceled. The roads were quiet. The house for once wasn't. Sawyer pulled out a set of old board games from the hall closet and let the girls argue over rules that no one remembered. Maisie didn't speak, but when Junie accidentally toppled the entire Monopoly bank, it was Maisie who knelt to help her rebuild. The smile that passed between them was enough to light the fireplace twice over. After dinner, the twins began to hum again, low and casual, the kind of tune children make up when they're safe. Maisie stood nearby, watching. Something in her posture changed. Her shoulders relaxed, her head tilted just slightly like a flower toward light. Then it happened. A single note escaped her lips, soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. Sawyer froze mid-step in the kitchen. He turned but said nothing. Junie noticed, too, eyes wide. "You're singing," she said gently. Maisie blinked and bolted. Sawyer found her in the garage, curled up in the back seat of the old station wagon they never used anymore. The cold didn't seem to bother her. Her breath came out in tiny clouds, her arms wrapped around her knees. He didn't open the door right away, just stood outside, hand on the frosted handle. "I heard you," he said, finally, and it was beautiful. Silence. "You don't have to be afraid of your own voice, Maisie, not here." A pause. Then I wasn't afraid, she whispered, barely more than air. "I forgot that I could." They sat together in the cold for a long while. No lectures, no pressure, just shared stillness, the kind that tells the truth without needing translation. Sawyer remembered how he used to think music would save her some magical song that would make everything right. But now he knew better. It wasn't music that saved people, it was being heard. That night, after the twins had gone to bed, Sawyer brought down the old guitar case from the attic. Dust puffed up as he opened it, revealing the worn, honey-colored body of the Taylor. He hadn't touched it in over a decade. Maisie stood in the doorway, eyes wide. She said nothing, but took 2 steps forward. "You remember this?" he asked softly. She nodded. He sat down, tuned the strings slowly, reverently. The wood creaked under his fingers, but the sound once he strummed was warm and full and alive. "I'm thinking maybe we can try something again," he said. Maisie stepped closer. "Not for performance," he added. "Not for anyone else. Just for us." She looked down. Then, as if trusting the strings more than her voice, she whispered, "Okay." As the fire dwindled to embers, Sawyer played the first chords of an old lullaby, one Maisie's mother used to hum when the nights were too long. Maisie listened. Then, quiet as snow, she began to hum. A harmony. Junie and Lyra, hearing from the hallway, crept back in. 4 voices, 1 guitar. No one planned it. No one practiced. But in that moment, the silence wasn't broken. It was transformed. There was something holy about the quiet that followed the music. Not the awkward hush of unsaid things, but a warm, golden stillness. Like the house itself was holding its breath, grateful, amazed at the return of a sound it thought it had lost forever. Sawyer sat motionless, his fingers still gently resting on the strings of his guitar. Across from him, Maisie kept her head down, but her humming continued soft and steady, as if each note was a thread stitching her back to the world. Junie and Lyra sat cross-legged on the floor, swaying slightly, eyes closed, absorbing every vibration. For the first time in years, Sawyer didn't feel like a man standing in the ruins of a life. He felt like someone building something new. The days that followed passed slowly and sweetly, like snow melting under weak winter sun. With the roads still too slick for school buses, the girls remained at the cabin. The mornings were filled with oatmeal and card games. The afternoons brought snowmen and sledding down the hill behind the woodshed. But the evenings that was, when the magic returned. Each night, as the light dimmed and the fire cracked alive, the girls would gather around the piano or guitar. They didn't call it practice. They didn't call it anything. They simply sang. Sometimes old hymns. Sometimes made-up tunes with nonsense words and harmonies only they could understand. And Maisie, God bless her, Maisie sang. She didn't say much during the day. She still avoided eye contact with strangers. But when the music started, she bloomed like spring, pushing through frozen ground. Sawyer kept the recorder going every time, placing it discreetly on the mantel. It wasn't for fame or memory. It was for safekeeping, like putting fireflies in a jar to prove to himself that the light had really happened. One Thursday evening, as Sawyer was tuning his guitar, Junie looked up from her sketchpad and said, "Do you think we could sing at the talent show?" Lyra looked up, startled. "You mean like, at school? On stage?" "Yeah," Junie said, like it was obvious. "We've got 3 songs now. That one Maisie started the other night. That one's good." Maisie's fingers tightened around her cocoa mug. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Sawyer set his guitar down slowly. "I'm not sure that's a great idea." "Why not?" Junie asked. "We're not scared." He looked at them, all 3 of them, determined, fierce, innocent in a way that hadn't been broken yet. That was the problem. He knew how easily the world could crack it. Because school talent shows can be tricky, he said carefully. People laugh when they don't understand something beautiful. And that kind of laugh, it cuts deeper than silence. Maisie nodded. She knew that laugh too well. But Junie didn't back down. Then maybe it's time someone gave them something they had to understand. The next morning, Sawyer walked out to the mailbox and found a flyer posted on the bulletin board. Beside it, Winter Talent Showcase, 1 night only, open to all students and families. Registration deadline, Friday. He stood there in the biting wind, the paper flapping gently like a dare. His hand hovered over it for a long time before he tore off one of the registration tabs. Back home, the girls had already set up a mock stage in the living room pillows, as footlights, a fireplace poker as a mic stand. Maisie was sitting at the keyboard, her fingers shyly finding chords, while Junie and Lyra experimented with harmonies. There was laughter, real belly-deep laughter. Sawyer watched from the doorway and said nothing. That evening he pulled out his old music journal, a battered leather-bound notebook he hadn't opened since before Maisie was born. The pages were filled with half-songs, lyrics scribbled in the dark melodies written for a voice he hadn't heard in a decade. He flipped to a page where only one line was written. "Some voices don't need to rise, they just need to reach." He tapped his pen against it, then added, "Tonight they reached me." Friday came. The girls submitted their names. No turning back. That night, as they rehearsed, something went wrong. Midway through a song, the piano let out a metallic clang, like a bell struck wrong. Maisie hit the key again. The note wavered. Junie tried to adjust her vocal line, but the pitch was off. Lyra faltered. Sawyer knelt beside the piano and pried open the lid. "Broken hammer," he said. "Probably from last year's cold snap. I'll see if I can fix it." Maisie looked panicked. "But we don't have time." Sawyer stood, then walked to the back room. When he returned, he was holding the Taylor guitar. The girls fell silent. "You know," he said slowly, "your harmonies, they'd sound even better with something warmer underneath, something simpler. Like this." He strummed once, low and smooth. The sound filled the room like candlelight. "We're changing the arrangement," Lyra asked. Sawyer smiled. "We're not changing. We're evolving." They spent the rest of the evening rearranging everything. No sheet music, no formal structure, just ears, hearts, and instinct. Junie and Lyra picked up the shift, instantly responding like twin wings catching a new wind. Maisie, seated on the bench beside her dad, began humming her part softly, gradually layering with confidence. By midnight, they had something new, not polished, not perfect, but alive. As they wrapped for the night, Junie looked up and said, "Do you think they'll hear us?" Sawyer paused, then replied, "If they're ready, they'll listen." The auditorium was older than most of the buildings in town. Creaky wooden floors, orange velvet curtains faded into a dull rust, and ceiling tiles that hummed with the memory of school dances, graduation speeches, and forgotten recitals. To some, it was just a gym with lights. But to Junie, Lyra, and Maisie, it looked like a mountain. Sawyer sat on the front row, the girls standing behind the curtain, peeking nervously through a tear in the fabric. The list of performers was taped to the wall beside them, hastily typed, and marked with penciled-in additions. Their group had been added last Ashore 14. Unnamed trio. "No one knows it's us," Junie said, more to herself than anyone else. "That's good," Lyra replied, shifting from foot to foot. "Let them laugh before we sing. It'll hit harder." Maisie said nothing. Her hands were folded tightly at her chest, eyes on her shoes. But she was there, standing, waiting. That alone was a miracle. The hours leading up to the performance had not been kind. It began with a teacher's offhand comment. "I hope the girls don't freeze up. That kind of thing leaves a mark on an audience." Then came the stares in the hallway, some curious, some amused, some openly mocking. Someone had even scribbled twin astrophe in marker on one of the practice room doors. Sawyer had seen it. He'd taken a breath, wiped it off, and walked back into the rehearsal like nothing happened. But inside, the old fury had stirred, the one he'd buried with every unsent letter to the parents who had whispered about his daughter. The same fury that had silenced his guitar for years. That night, as the girls rehearsed one final time in the living room, Sawyer's fingers slipped on a chord. A sour note rang out. He cursed, quietly adjusted the tuning peg. The girls paused. "You okay?" Junie asked. "I'm fine," Sawyer lied. Maisie looked at him, then gently touched his arm. He turned toward her, surprised. "I can start it," she whispered. He blinked. The first note. She nodded. That was the moment he realized she wasn't just healing. She was leading. Backstage, the MC's voice called out, "Next up, a special performance from 3 brave young ladies. Please welcome." Our surprise trio, applause. Light. Movement. Time slowed. Sawyer stepped onto the stage. First guitar slung low across his chest, wearing his worn flannel shirt and jeans he hadn't bought for the occasion. He didn't need polish. He needed presence. Then came Junie and Lyra holding hands, heads high, and finally Maisie's slight quiet, but upright like a sapling refusing to bend to wind. Gasps trickled from the audience. Some recognized them. Others just stared. The girls moved to the center. Sawyer sat to the side, strummed a soft, open chord. Then Maisie closed her eyes and sang. It wasn't loud. It wasn't technically flawless, but it was true. Her voice trembled like a violin finding its breath, then grew steadier, warmer. Junie joined in on the next line, their voices brushing against each other like feathers. Lyra entered last, sliding underneath them with a harmony so delicate it felt like memory. Sawyer watched as their voices wove in and out, never competing, only lifting. When he hit the bridge, he let the melody breathe. The guitar's tone was like wind through pine, raw, comforting, resolute. The audience, restless moments before, was still. Some leaned forward. Some sat with hands clasped to lips. And some cried. The final chorus swelled, not with volume, but with grace. Maisie's voice floated upward. Junie held the center. Lyra whispered the undercurrent. 3 voices. One sound. Not polished, but perfect. The last note faded like the hush after snowfall. Then silence. And for a long, hanging moment, that was all there was. A woman in the second row, grandmother to someone on the soccer team, was the first to stand. Then a boy in the back. Then a teacher. Then the entire auditorium rose in unison. The applause wasn't wild. It was reverent. Junie squeezed Lyra's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. Maisie looked out, blinking fast. Sawyer smiled at them, truly, deeply. Smiled, then bowed his head over the strings. Later in the hallway, as students swirled around them with congratulations and wide-eyed stares, A boy, one who had once laughed when Maisie flinched at the bell, walked up to her. He didn't say anything at first. Then awkwardly, he held out a single wrapped peppermint. "For you," he said. I'm sorry." Maisie looked at him, then took the candy and nodded. Outside, the wind had picked up again, but it wasn't biting. It was brisk, clean, like a breath taken after being underwater too long. Sawyer helped the girls into the truck. None of them said much. The radio stayed off. The headlights carved tunnels through the snow. But in his chest there was music. Not a song. A beginning. Back at the cabin, Junie and Lyra fell asleep early, curled like commas in their blankets. Sawyer stood at the door to Maisie's room just watching. She sat cross-legged on her bed, earbuds in softly replaying the recording of their performance on Sawyer's phone. She looked up, pulled out one bud. "Can we record it tomorrow?" He blinked. Record what? Maisie tilted her head. "Our album," then smiled. 3 days after the performance, a photo of Junie, Lyra, and Maisie on stage appeared in the local town newspaper under the headline, "3 Voices. One Moment Talent Show Brings Unexpected Tears." It was a small article tucked between the church bake sale schedule and a notice about pothole repairs on Main Street, but it meant everything. Sawyer clipped it and pinned it above the kitchen sink. Not for pride. For proof. Proof that something pure had happened, and for once the world hadn't looked away. The next week brought more attention than anyone had expected. Ellis Warren, the school's music teacher, and someone Sawyer had known long ago in another life, stopped by the cabin under the pretense of dropping off a thank you card. Her cheeks were red from the wind, but her eyes were warm. "I wanted to ask," she said, handing Sawyer a folded flyer. "Would the girls consider submitting a performance for the district showcase in Lincoln next month? It's juried real stage, real audience, real scouts from community arts centers." Sawyer hesitated. He looked toward the living room, where Junie and Lyra were sprawled on the rug doing homework, and Maisie was quietly doodling in the margins of a music notebook. "Do they know you're asking?" Ellis smiled. "Not yet." "I thought I'd talk to you first." He nodded. "I'll ask them." But deep down the nerves began to stir. The last performance had been a miracle, yes, but it had also been delicate. And this was bigger, riskier, public. He'd seen what public attention did to young talent. It either lifted them up or carved them hollow. And Sawyer had already lost too much to risk hollowing someone else. That evening after dinner, Sawyer gathered the girls around the kitchen table and unfolded the flyer. Maisie traced her finger over the bold title at the top, "Voices of Tomorrow's State Youth Arts Showcase." Junie leaned in. "So we'd be competing." "Not exactly," Sawyer said. "It's more like being featured, a chance to be seen." "By people who can help?" Lyra asked. "By people who can judge," Maisie said softly. Everyone turned to look at her. Sawyer studied his daughter's face. She wasn't afraid, just cautious. The scars of silence never truly faded. They just shifted shape. "We don't have to," he said gently. "What you did last week was already more than anyone could ask." Maisie didn't respond right away. Then, almost reluctantly, she whispered, "But what if there's a girl out there like me, and she's waiting for someone to sing first?" Junie reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Sawyer exhaled slowly. "Then we'd better give her a song worth hearing." The girls worked harder than ever after that. They chose a piece that blended Maisie's gentle tone with Junie's brightness and Lyra's subtle depth. Sawyer helped them transpose it for guitar, adding a rhythm that built gradually, a quiet storm of emotion beneath the harmonies. They practiced in the garage, most nights the acoustics oddly perfect among the old tools and oil cans. Junie called it the echo room. Maisie started keeping a small journal, writing lyrics and scribbling melodic fragments. She didn't share them yet, But Sawyer noticed she kept them close, slipped inside her coat pocket like a secret she wasn't ready to give away. Everything seemed to be going right until it didn't. The day before the submission deadline, a letter arrived from the school superintendent's office. It was addressed to Sawyer directly and printed on thick, formal paper. He read it once, then again, and felt something inside him go cold. Dear Mr. Whitlock, after reviewing district policy and receiving multiple parent concerns regarding last week's talent show performance, the school board has determined that non-enrolled students are not eligible to perform at district events. As such, the trio act featuring your daughter Maisie and students Junie and Lyra Carpenter does not meet the criteria for submission. We understand the disappointment this may cause and encourage all eligible students to submit individual performances instead. Sincerely, Brenda M. Ellsworth, Director of Youth Arts Participation. Sawyer sat at the kitchen table long after the letter slipped from his fingers. He didn't tell the girls right away. He couldn't. That night after they'd gone to bed, he called Ellis. She knew he said quietly. Whoever this Brenda is, she knew exactly what she was doing, and someone fed it to her. There was a long pause on the line. I'm sorry, Sawyer. I had no idea this would happen. I did, he said bitterly. That's the problem. I've seen how fast people change their tune when something real starts to shine. You're not going to let this stop them, are you? He looked at the recorder on the mantel. No, he said. But I need to be smart about how we fight this. The next day, he sat the girls down and read them the letter. Maisie didn't cry. Junie did quietly. Lyra folded her arms jaw tight. So what now? We just disappear again. No, Sawyer said. We record it anyway. We send it. If they throw it away, that's their choice. But they're going to hear it. He turned to Maisie. And if you want to write something new, something that says what you want them to hear, now's the time. Maisie looked up, eyes clear. Then she stood, walked to her room, and came back with her notebook. She placed it on the table. The title on the front page read, A Song for the Silent. The melody was slow at first, tentative, like someone walking barefoot across ice. Then note by note, it gained strength. Sawyer sat beside Maisie on the living room floor, guitar in his lap, watching as she traced each word in her notebook with a finger before letting it become sound. Junie and Lyra were curled up on the sofa, listening with the kind of reverence that only children can muster when they know they're in the presence of something important. A song for the ones who don't speak loud, but carry thunder in their hearts. Maisie's voice trembled slightly on the word. Thunder, but she didn't stop. Sawyer strummed along in a soft minor key. He knew better than to interrupt the shape of a song when it was still being born. Maisie's notebook was filled with verses now. Dozens, fragments, scribbled dreams. But this song, this one, felt different. This wasn't just music, it was testimony. And if the district didn't want to hear them, they would make it impossible to ignore. By midweek, the cabin had transformed into something else entirely. The kitchen became a vocal warm-up zone. The hallway turned into a choreographed practice path. Even the garage, once a cold echo chamber, now held blankets tacked to the walls for acoustics. Sawyer set up his old condenser mic, bought long ago for gigs that never came, and wired it to a vintage laptop he'd dusted off. The girls took turns rehearsing their harmonies, while Maisie sat cross-legged on the floor, refining every word. They were building a cathedral of sound in a house made of pine and grief, and it was working. Until the piano broke. It happened the night before their final take. Maisie was running through the intro of A Song for the Silent, her fingers now confident on the keys, her voice syncing perfectly with the slow strum of Sawyer's guitar. Then, a sharp clack. The middle C hammer stuck. She hit it again. The note came out dead. Sawyer rushed over, opened the lid, and sighed. Broken flange, he muttered. Maisie's hands trembled. "I can't play without it." Sawyer crouched. "You don't have to. We'll shift the arrangement to guitar only. You've done it before." "No," she said the word barely above a whisper. "Not for this song." Sawyer looked into her eyes and saw at that tight coil of fear twisting with pride. The piano wasn't just an instrument. It was armor. It gave her a place to hide while she found the courage to sing. He nodded slowly. "I'll fix it." He worked on it all night. By lantern light, using tweezers, glue, and a prayer, Sawyer disassembled the damaged action and reattached the broken flange. The process took hours. His fingers ached, his vision blurred, but he didn't stop. Not because he thought he could save the instrument, but because he knew he had to try. At dawn, he pressed the middle C. It sang. Not perfectly, but true. By the time the girls woke up, the sun had spilled gold across the snow. Maisie sat down at the piano, touched the key, held her breath. It responded like it remembered her. She looked at her father. No smile. No words. Just a small nod of something deeper. A kind of understanding that lived beyond language. Sawyer stepped back, letting the three girls find their positions. Maisie began the intro. Junie and Lyra exchanged one glance, then to the girl in the back who won't raise her hand, to the boy in the hall with silence like sand. Their harmonies were tighter than ever, layered, precise. Then Maisie entered the chorus. "We were made for music, even if we never make a sound. We were made for more than fading. We were made to be found." The guitar picked up warm and supportive, letting their voices glide over the chords like light over water. By the end of the final note, no one spoke. Sawyer hit stop on the recorder, heart pounding. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew that was the take. He uploaded the file to a private link, typed out the submission form himself. Where it asked for the group name, he paused, then typed the silent three. Where it asked for a message to the jury panel, he wrote, "We know we don't meet your rules, but we hope we meet your hearts. If there's room for three girls who learned to sing in the cracks of the world, then maybe this song is for you too." He hovered over the submit button for a moment, then clicked and let it go. The next afternoon, the rejection came swiftly, not from the jury, but from a parent. Sawyer was in the grocery store, thumbing through a box of bruised apples when he heard it. Must be easy using pity to get on stage these days. He turned. It was Darryl Crane, father of a boy in Maisie's old class. Banker. Deacon. The kind of man who smiled with his mouth, but not his eyes. "Excuse me," Sawyer said, calm but firm. Darryl shrugged. "Just saying, a lot of folks think it's manipulative, parading around those poor twins in your situation. Some people work hard to earn the spotlight." Sawyer clenched his jaw. They did work hard, and they earned every second. Darryl leaned closer. "Well, don't expect everyone to clap just because you brought a sad story with a melody." Sawyer didn't reply. He didn't need to, because some songs weren't meant for men like that. They were meant for the girls still learning how to sing, and for the fathers who refused to let them be silenced. Snow had started to melt into patches of slush on the sidewalks, but the air was still sharp enough to sting your throat. March was the kind of month Nebraska never fully committed to neither winter nor spring, just a long gray pause in between. At the cabin, it was warm, but only because of the fire that Sawyer kept burning and the strange momentum that had taken hold of the household. Even after the rejection, the song lingered in the air like smoke that clung to your clothes. Maisie played it every day now, not rehearsing, just living in it. The twins hummed while brushing their teeth, while feeding the birds, while stirring soup. Even Sawyer caught himself whistling the chorus under his breath while chopping wood. The district might have dismissed them, but something deeper had taken root. Ellis stopped by again on Friday, holding a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Her cheeks were pink from the wind, and her smile, hesitant but kind, made Sawyer feel like a teenager with splinters in his hands again. "I found something I think belongs to you," she said, setting the package on the kitchen counter. Sawyer raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. Ellis unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a vintage capo, worn smooth on the edges, and a handwritten chord chart in his wife's handwriting. The ink was smudged in places, but the title was still legible. "For Maisie Someday." He stared at it. The song they never finished. A lullaby written during nights when Maisie had colic, and Sawyer played guitar in the hallway to soothe her back to sleep. "I thought it got lost after the fire," he murmured. "It was in the school's music closet," Ellis said quietly. "I found it tucked in an old case." Maisie entered the room just then, eyes curious. Sawyer handed her the paper. She traced the letters with one finger, then looked up. "Can we play it?" He blinked. "You want to finish it?" Maisie nodded. "It already feels finished. I just want to hear it." They spent the next 2 hours on the living room floor with Sawyer cross-legged and barefoot, the girls leaning against pillows and couch cushions, listening as he pieced together the chord structure. It started soft, 2 chords, alternating like a heartbeat. Then a lift, then a slow descent. Maisie sang the first line. Junie and Lyra joined in by the second verse. By the time they reached the bridge, Sawyer's hands moved like they had never stopped playing. His fingers remembered what his soul had long tried to forget. He looked over at Ellis, who was standing in the doorway with a hand over her mouth. She wasn't crying, but she was listening like it was the first time she'd heard music in years. The next morning, Sawyer woke before the sun and walked out to the old shed where he'd stored his performance gear, the remnants of his past life, before grief turned him into a carpenter with calloused hands and unfinished songs. He opened the guitar case carefully, reverently. The Taylor still gleamed beneath its layer of dust. Light mahogany body, nickel fret strings long since dulled, but still strung with memory. He sat on the bench beside the shed's window and began restringing it 1 string at a time, winding tight, tuning slowly. He oiled the fretboard, polished the body, even glued a small crack near the bass that had gone unnoticed for years. When he finished, he ran his hand along the curve of the instrument and said quietly, "Let's do this right this time." Later that afternoon, he called the girls into the living room. The fireplace glowed behind him, casting long shadows. He set the freshly restrung guitar on the stand, like an offering. "This," he said, "is the first guitar I ever owned. Your mother gave it to me when we got engaged." Maisie stepped forward, eyes wide. "It was the first thing that made me believe I could do something good with music," he continued. "I think it's time we bring it back," Junie whispered. "Is this for the next performance?" Sawyer hesitated. "No," Lyra frowned. "Then what's it for?" He looked at all 3 of them. "It's for us. No stage, no judges, just a recording. A full session with all the songs you've worked on. Maisie's originals, your harmonies, even that lullaby. We'll release it online. Free. No labels. No gatekeepers." He paused. "And if the world hears it, good. But if only one kid out there finds it and realizes their voice matters, that's enough." Maisie nodded slowly. "It's more than enough." They began that weekend. The garage became their studio. Sawyer hung quilts along the walls, borrowed a neighbor's mixing board, and installed old string lights across the rafters. They recorded everything false starts, laughter, whispered notes, late-night harmonies, sung with mugs of hot cocoa in hand. The final track was the lullaby, Maisie's mother's unfinished song, now carried by her daughter's voice, held steady by the guitar that had once lulled her to sleep. When it ended, no one said a word. Junie clicked, "Stop on the recorder." Lyra laid her head on Maisie's shoulder. Sawyer looked down at the guitar in his lap, then over at Ellis, who had sat in for the session quietly offering tea and cookies and long, meaningful glances. He whispered, "Welcome back." He didn't say who he was speaking to. The girls, the music, his wife, himself, maybe all of it. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Sawyer uploaded the album to a free streaming site under the name The Silent Three. Songs for the ones who listen. In the description, he wrote only, "For the ones who were told they were too quiet to matter. For the ones who waited to be heard." Here we are. By sunrise, the first comment appeared, then the second. Then a message from a school nurse in Ohio, a father in Vermont, a girl in Oregon who said she played the lullaby on loop while drawing pictures of stars. The world was listening. And the guitar finally was home again. The first time Sawyer walked into the Whitmore Civic Center in Lincoln, he felt like he'd wandered into a place that belonged to someone else's life. The lobby glowed with polished marble and soft jazz, playing overhead too elegant for a man whose hands were permanently calloused. Maisie clung to her lyric notebook like a lifeline. Junie and Lyra walked on either side of her shoulders, squared eyes scanning everything, part awe, part defense. They weren't on the performance roster, not officially. The district had made that clear. But a last-minute cancellation opened a 10-minute window during the youth art exhibition, and Ellis, braver than any of them expected, had pushed hard enough long enough that the event director finally said, "Fine. One song. No announcement. No introduction." It wasn't a stage slot. It was a chance. And sometimes that's enough. Backstage, the girls sat in folding chairs, hands in their laps. The buzz of other performers tuning violins, reciting poetry, checking hair in compact mirrors echoed all around them. No one spoke to them. No one knew who they were. And for once, that anonymity felt like armor. Sawyer stood nearby, tuning his guitar slowly. The Taylor gleamed under the overhead lights, restrung, polished, alive. He looked at his daughter, then at the twins, and thought, they've already won, just by walking into this room. But the girls weren't thinking about that. They were thinking about the moment ahead, the 10 silent steps from chair to stage, the first breath before the first note, the echo that would either rise or swallow them whole. Maisie's hands were trembling. Cold, Sawyer asked gently. She shook her head. "No, just awake." He smiled. "Good." The tech assistant gave a sharp nod. "You're up. Curtain goes in 30. No announcement. No title. No warning. Just a spotlight. And a room full of strangers." The lights dimmed. Junie stepped onto the stage, first heart pounding so loud she thought it might come through her shoes. Lyra followed, her fingers brushing the sleeve of her sister's coat, a grounding signal they'd used since kindergarten. Maisie came last. She didn't stumble. She didn't shrink. She walked like the floor had finally agreed to carry her. Sawyer sat at stage left, guitar in hand. No mic, no amp, just wood strings and intention. They took their positions. Junie adjusted her scarf. Lyra swallowed hard. Maisie closed her eyes. The first note rang out. It was barely audible at first, just Maisie's voice, breathy and round like a story being told to someone half asleep. Then Junie entered steady and bright, her tone lifting Maisie's like scaffolding. Lyra followed, her alto a gentle foundation beneath them both. They didn't try to impress. They didn't chase applause. They just were. And it worked. Halfway through the first verse, the room shifted. The polite audience chatter faded. Phones were lowered. People leaned in. The harmonies built 3 distinct colors, merging into one warm hue. Sawyer played beneath it all, each note on the guitar perfectly timed, perfectly restrained his pride, held not in volume, but in how he made room for them. At the bridge, Maisie stepped forward slightly and sang, We are not the echoes of someone else's sound. We are the music no one saw coming, and we are still loud, even now. The final chorus climbed not in volume, but in courage, and when the last note fell away, there was a beat, maybe two, of absolute sacred silence. Then the room erupted. Sawyer looked up, stunned. People weren't just clapping. They were standing, on their feet, wiping tears, turning to one another in shared disbelief. One woman pressed a hand over her chest and mouthed, "Beautiful." An older man in a veteran's cap just nodded, eyes closed. Even a teen boy in a varsity jacket whistled low and muttered, "Holy crap." Maisie looked toward the crowd, then at her dad. She didn't cry. She smiled. Backstage, they didn't get swarmed. No autograph requests. No business cards. Just a quiet line of strangers, one by one, coming forward to say, "Thank you." That was my daughter's story. I haven't felt something like that in years. A local radio host asked for a copy of the song. A woman from an arts nonprofit asked if they'd consider performing for children with special needs. Sawyer said yes, to all of it. Because now it wasn't just about healing, it was about giving. That night, as they packed up and walked to the parking lot, the wind had shifted. Warmer now. The kind that hinted at spring, even when snow still lingered in the corners. Maisie walked a little ahead, hand in hand with Junie and Lyra. Sawyer and Ellis followed behind, quiet. After a long stretch of silence, Ellis said, "You know, if she ever wants to study music, I know some people." Sawyer looked at her. "I mean real study. Scholarships, mentors, places that won't just tolerate a quiet kid, they'll cherish her." He nodded, the thought both thrilling and terrifying. "I'll let her decide," he said. "But thank you." Ellis smiled. "She's already more than ready." They stopped at the truck. Sawyer loaded the guitar case into the back. Maisie turned and looked up at him. "Do they really hear us?" she asked. Sawyer looked at her. Not the fragile girl who once hid behind silence, but the artist who had just sung her story to a room full of strangers. "They felt you," he said. "That's more than hearing. That's remembering." Maisie nodded. Then, unexpectedly, she pulled him into a hug, tight and unshaking. It was the first time in years. And in that moment, Sawyer Whitlock knew music hadn't just healed his daughter. It had healed him. Sawyer never thought a word could be a gift. A single syllable breathed into existence by a child who had once gone months without uttering a sound. What could be more fragile, more sacred? But the word wasn't dad. It wasn't music. It wasn't even love. It was again. And it changed everything. It happened on a Sunday afternoon in early April. The sun was warm enough to melt the stubborn crust of snow clinging to the roots of pine trees behind the cabin. The girls were out on the porch, with Ellis sketching out a flyer for a small community concert. They were planning a benefit for a local shelter. Maisie sat by the open screen door, her notebook resting on her knees, eyes following the curves of her own pencil lines, but her mind somewhere else. Sawyer was inside tuning his guitar. It was the same song they'd played at Whitmore Civic Center. The same song that had cracked open the room, turned strangers into believers. He played the final chord slowly, then turned to her. "You think we should add a bridge next time?" Maisie looked up. Her mouth opened just slightly. Then she said, "Again." Sawyer stared at her, confused. "What?" She sat up straighter. "Play it again." His hand froze on the neck of the guitar. Not because she spoke. She'd been speaking more often in recent weeks, especially around Junie and Lyra. Whispers at first. Then soft exchanges inside jokes, even laughter. But this was different. This was a request. Spoken without fear. Spoken with desire. He grinned, swallowed once to clear the emotion tightening his throat, and said, "Yes, ma'am." He played it again. And this time, she sang with him. That evening after dinner, Maisie stood up from the table and said, "I want to record a message." Junie blinked. For who? For everyone, Maisie said, simply. Sawyer gently closed the dish towel he'd been folding. Okay. They set up the recorder in the living room, same as always. The lights were dim, the fire just coals now. Maisie sat on the stool hands resting in her lap. She took a deep breath. Then she said, "Hi. My name is Maisie Whitlock. I used to think silence was safer, that not talking meant not hurting. But then someone sang near me, not to me, near me. And I remembered what my mother's voice sounded like. I remembered that I used to sing too. So if you're listening to this, and you're quiet like I was, I just want to say you're not broken. You're just waiting. And when you're ready, we'll hear you." She looked at her father. "Okay," Sawyer, who could barely keep his hand from shaking, pressed. "Stop." "Perfect," he said. They uploaded it that night, attaching the message to their song recordings. By morning, the video had spread far beyond their small Nebraska town. A podcast host picked it up and called it the most important 90 seconds of the year. A nonprofit in Chicago reached out asking if Maisie would speak virtually for their spring fundraiser. A university in Oregon requested permission to use the clip in their music therapy seminar. And emails poured in, from mothers of silent children, from grown adults who said they'd never sung outside their cars, from teenagers who wrote, "I didn't cry until now, and I think I needed to." One message, though, came from a girl named Avery in Montana. She wrote, "My mom passed away last year. I haven't spoken to anyone since, but I played your song for my dog. Then I sang it with him. I just wanted you to know. I think you helped me speak again, too." Maisie printed the message and pinned it to her wall, right next to her mother's photo. When Sawyer saw her do it, he didn't speak. He simply sat beside her and placed his hand over hers. In that moment, he didn't feel like the father of a miracle. He just felt like a father. And that was more than enough. Later that week, the girls performed at the town library, a small crowd, mostly neighbors, and a few curious souls who had seen the article. No cameras, no clapping out of pity, just people listening. At the end of the show, a little boy with a lisp asked if they had a CD. Junie promised to mail him one. Lyra gave him a drawing of a treble clef with wings. Maisie bent down and whispered, "What's your favorite color?" He said, "Green." Maisie smiled. "That's mine too." After the library show, they began planning a regional tour. Not big venues, not even real stages. Just shelters, schools, rehab centers. Anywhere people were learning to find their voices again. Sawyer called it the Echo Tour. Ellis offered to come along as a second driver and tour manager. Maisie called her the mom friend, and Ellis didn't even pretend to hate it. One evening as they sat by the fireplace, Sawyer asked Maisie if she ever wanted to write a song about her silence. She thought for a long time, then said, "No." Sawyer nodded. "Too painful." Maisie shook her head. "No. Just, I'm done being a silence. I want to be everything else now." That night, he took out his journal, the one where he used to write lyrics during the long, dark nights after Maisie stopped talking. He flipped to the first empty page, then slowly, carefully, he wrote. April 12th, Maisie said, "Again today." And I think the world began again too. The first stop of the Echo Tour was a community center in Hastings, a modest building with peeling paint and the smell of old books and fresh coffee in the air. The folding chairs were mismatched. The sound system was borrowed from the bingo hall next door. The audience was a blend of middle schoolers, veterans, single mothers, and two toddlers sharing a juice box on the floor. It was perfect. No pressure. No cameras. Just open faces, each one holding some version of a story they hadn't told yet. Maisie stood beside Junie and Lyra on the makeshift stage, an old rug laid over creaky floorboards. Sawyer sat behind them with the Taylor guitar resting gently across his knee, fingers poised like he was holding a conversation with the instrument rather than playing it. When they began singing A Song for the Silent, something shifted, not just in the room, but in the people inside it. A mother in the second row closed her eyes and leaned back. A teenager near the exit pulled his hoodie tighter, but didn't leave. An elderly man gripped the armrest of his wheelchair and nodded his lips, moving in rhythm with the chorus. By the final verse, even the toddlers had stopped squirming. And when the last note fell, the applause wasn't explosive, it was reverent. Somehow, that was louder than any roar. After the show, people came up in small, quiet groups, not to praise but to connect. A man named Lou, who had fought in Vietnam, told Sawyer, "That one with the slow bridge." It reminded me of letters my wife used to write me. She's been gone 15 years. I don't usually cry, but today I did. A high school counselor asked for flyers to share with students who had been through bullying or loss. A young girl shyly handed Maisie a crumpled note. Sometimes I don't talk because people don't wait long enough, but I think you would. Maisie folded the note, pressed it to her chest, and whispered, "Always." They performed in 7 towns over the next 2 weeks, each place more humble than the last: church basements, lunchrooms, fire stations. Each time the result was the same: stillness, then tears, then something like hope. Junie and Lyra became experts at calming nerves before shows. They taught Sawyer how to do tick-tock hand dances poorly, and made Ellis laugh so hard during one rehearsal she accidentally knocked over a mic stand. Maisie more than anyone transformed. She began speaking before songs, introducing them, sharing why they were written. Her voice, once a whisper, carried across rooms, now not loudly, but clearly with certainty that turned heads and softened hearts. One night after a show at a women's recovery center, a woman stood to speak. She had been silent for most of the session, arms crossed, expression guarded. But now she said, "I don't know who taught you to sing like that. But whoever they were, they gave the world back to you, and you gave it to us." Maisie stepped down, hugged the woman tightly, and whispered something only they heard. Afterward, the woman told Ellis, "That kid, she's the bravest thing I've ever seen." One rainy evening, as the group drove back to the cabin, the van fell into a quiet rhythm. The girls dozed in the back seat, leaning on each other. Ellis, in the passenger seat, stared out the window at the blur of pine trees. Sawyer kept his eyes on the road, but his mind wandered. He had thought this tour would be about giving back, about helping the girls process their pain, and maybe giving others a little light. But what he hadn't expected was how much he needed it too. Each performance was a thread quietly stitching something together inside him, something he didn't realize had come undone. He thought about his late wife often during the drives, her laughter, her songs, the way she'd coaxed music out of him like it was the most natural thing in the world. And now Maisie was doing the same. She had become a bridge, not just between notes, but between people, between past and present, between pain and peace. They returned home to a stack of mail and 3 voicemail messages. One was from a producer at a local radio station who had heard about the tour and wanted to feature them on a morning program. Another was from a school district in Missouri asking if the trio could perform at an anti-bullying summit. The third was from the Whitmore Civic Center, a woman named Caroline. She had been in the audience that night, the one who cried quietly in the 3rd row. She now worked for the State Board of Cultural Affairs. Her message was simple: "We'd like to invite the Silent Three to headline the Youth Voices Gala in June. No auditions, no forms, just bring the music. We'll bring the spotlight." Sawyer read the message twice, then again. He looked at the girls, Maisie humming softly on the couch, Junie and Lyra drawing plans for their next show. Ellis sipping tea, and watching them all like someone who knew the value of every second she'd been given. He tapped the phone once, then he smiled. That night, as the fire crackled low, Maisie handed her father a new sheet of lyrics. "I wrote a duet," she said. "For you and me." Sawyer scanned the words. The first line read, "I found my voice in the space between your silence." He looked at her eyes shining. "Will you sing it with me?" Maisie didn't answer. She just picked up the guitar and strummed the first chord. The theater in Lincoln was a far cry from the places they'd played before. No peeling paint, no creaky chairs, no toddlers crawling under folding tables. The walls were brushed steel and soft oak, the stage polished to a muted gleam, the lights real stage lights hung like silent stars from the rafters. It was the Youth Voices Gala. And somehow, the Silent Three were headlining. Sawyer stood in the wings, guitar in hand, sweat forming at the base of his neck, despite the crisp, air-conditioned calm. He had played bigger venues in the past, before life swerved, before grief pressed pause on everything, but never with this kind of weight. Not with his daughter at the mic. Not with his second chance standing on trembling legs beneath a spotlight. Maisie was adjusting the mic stand, not nervously, but with quiet confidence. Junie and Lyra flanked her, steady as ever, her sisters now in more than spirit. 3 girls who had been discarded, doubted, dismissed. And yet here they stood. No stage manager gave them a countdown. No MC announced their names. The program simply read, "The Voice We Keep," a closing performance by the Silent Three. Maisie turned to look at her father. Their eyes met. He nodded once. She nodded back. And then she sang. The song began with a single line, barely more than a whisper. It wasn't one they'd written to impress. It wasn't made for scouts or scholarships or applause. It was a song about memory, about the sounds we hold on to when the world gets too loud, about the voices we lose and the ones we fight to keep. Junie and Lyra joined on the second verse, their harmonies tighter than ever, woven like linen, warm and resilient. The crowd leaned in, breath caught. Somewhere near the back, someone wept openly. Sawyer played beneath them his fingers, moving not like a performer, but like a father holding the pulse of something sacred. The Taylor guitar didn't just ring, it spoke, echoing gently across the velvet of the room. At the bridge, Maisie took a single step forward and sang. "I used to think my silence meant I was broken. Now I know. It was just waiting to be music." The lights dimmed softly. The final note lingered, and in that breathless space between end and echo, the room stood still. Then came the standing ovation. But even that felt quiet, like thunder heard from a distant hill. Reverent. Earned. Afterward, back in the green room, the girls collapsed into a pile of giggles and half-eaten granola bars. Junie flopped onto the couch dramatically. If that wasn't the top of the mountain, I don't know what is. Lyra poked her. "You say that after every show." Maisie sat cross-legged on the floor, still catching her breath, a gentle smile on her lips. She looked to Sawyer. "You played like Mom was there." He nodded. She was. Then Maisie reached for her notebook, worn, dog-eared, full of scribbled lyrics and half-finished thoughts, and pulled out a sealed envelope. She handed it to her father. Sawyer raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "It's for you." "But not now." He hesitated, then slid it into his coat pocket. He knew better than to pry. Some words are meant to be opened at the right moment. Weeks passed. The performances slowed. Summer arrived with the sound of cicadas and the scent of cut grass. Maisie began volunteering at the local music camp, helping younger kids write their first songs. She never raised her voice, but somehow every child listened when she spoke. Junie and Lyra launched a YouTube channel, mostly acoustic covers and songwriting tutorials. Their subscriber count climbed steadily, but it wasn't the numbers that mattered. It was the comment that read, "I played your harmony video for my sister. She sang with me for the first time." And Sawyer, he built a small recording studio in the shed, not for a label, not for profit, just for moments. One quiet Sunday, Maisie found her father sitting on the porch, staring out at the trees. He had the envelope she'd given him weeks ago in his lap unopened. She sat beside him. "Today's the day," she asked. He nodded slowly. He opened it. Inside was a single page, written in Maisie's careful hand. "Dear Dad, I don't remember the first time you sang to me, but I remember the first time you stopped. It wasn't your fault. Grief is heavy. Silence is loud, and I was so afraid of making it worse that I became part of it. But you waited, and when I finally sang again, you didn't rush, you didn't push, you just listened. That saved me. I don't know where this road will take me or what songs I'll write next, but I know one thing, my voice exists because of yours. And that's the voice I'll keep." Love, Maisie. Sawyer folded the letter and held it in both hands like something holy. He didn't speak, but Maisie reached over, rested her head on his shoulder, and that was enough. That evening the family gathered in the living room. No rehearsals, no spotlight. Just Junie Lyra, Maisie Ellis, and Sawyer with his guitar. They sang softly, faces lit by firelight and memory. No recording this time. No audience. Just each other. The last line of the lullaby, Maisie's mother's unfinished song, rang out in a voice once lost to fear. "Even in the quiet, I'll be singing for you." In the end, there was no grand stage, no viral explosion, just a family that found its way back to sound, and a girl who once chose silence, now using her voice not to be heard, but to heal. And sometimes, the voices we almost never hear are the ones that stay with us the longest. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Leave us a comment below. Your words mean more than you know. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, quiet miracles, second chances, love that heals, feel free to subscribe. We'll be right here, waiting to share the next one with you. Thank you truly for spending your precious time with us today. It means everything.